We've seen the example of signals and those sort of whistleblowers and things before the fact. They come up in the royal commissions and the investigations. And you've highlighted in your pathways model. What do you think is some of the more common organizational barriers to tapping into those insights and learning from them? And how can we break that cycle of missing them?
They don't listen to dissenting voices. So if a consultant or an underground supervisor or a supervisor in trucking or a worker raises a safety issue, it doesn't have any traction. We have rewarded increasingly hierarchical systems where management, the gap of pay between the management and average worker has grown, and people don't think that those doing jobs at the shop floor know anything. What they do. So that's part of it, but it's not just them, it's consultants. Pike River, the consultant on hydro mining, left because he was unhappy with the mining system. Underground supervisor Beaconsfield expressed concerns prior to the incident. There was a whistleblower in trucking. He got pilloried. Whistleblowers are seldom rewarded and usually severely punished for their activities. So we need to protect them more, but the real thing is we need to create vehicles for people to raise issues. So we need stronger unions in the workplace that are committed to safety and can represent workers. One of the problems with the current HSR system, health and safety rep system, is they only represent a work group and they don't represent the whole work site. And that in very big work sites can result in a very fractured form of representation. In the mining industry, they have in New South Wales and Queensland, and in coal, and in Queensland in metal as well, site safety health reps. So they represent the whole site. They can talk to anyone on site from below the mine manager down, staff manager, and they actually get people from management coming to see them, engineers and that, when they've got an issue that can't be reconciled. Because they can raise it, they have statutory powers, they can actually suspend the mine in a situation of imminent risk. They also have, and this would be a great model for industries outside of mining, all high hazard industries, New South Wales and coal and metal and coal in Queensland have what are effectively industry safety and health rep. They are full-time. In coal, they're paid by the union. They're statutory officers under the Act. They can only do things related to health and safety. They can't do anything to do with industrial relations. It's only health and safety. They can be removed from office if they go beyond that. They have most of the powers of a government inspector. In Queensland, they don't even need to give out notice. They can go to a site like a government inspector and say, I'm at the gates, let me in. Now, what this does, it means that they can go to ununionised sites, they can go to sites where the representation system is there but very weak and people are afraid to speak out, which is a huge problem in the mining industry, but I would suspect in other industries as well. And also the fact that they exist means when the management speaks to the site safety rep can go somewhere else if they're not. So it actually develops a more cooperative atmosphere, and the regulators, they develop closer contact with the government inspectors, and so it works. You end up that more equal power. You end up with a more cooperative arrangement, even in an industry not noted for its cooperation. I think every high hazard industry should have these people, because they would make a huge difference and improve health and safety in all high hazard industries, not just mining. And I know the union is pushing to have this covered all of over Australia in mining. So, but Dreamworld, I mean, if you'd had ISHR who could have come in and looked at Dreamworld, that incident may not have occurred. I mean, there were such catastrophic failures. The union had actually lodged a fairly detailed complaint, which, while it didn't deal with all the specifics in the lead up to the death, did mark failures in systems which were relevant to what occurred and a pattern of failure. And as you know, it was never properly followed up. Well, That's a failure on the inspectorate's part, because I've been out with inspectors, and normally when a union or another body makes complaints, then they're treated seriously and they properly investigate it, as they should be. So if you want that sort of feedback loop to work, you need better systems of self-reporting within organisations, but also an independent representative structure so that people feel they can speak out and they can speak to somebody who can take the issue up on their behalf, and therefore, because people feel under a lot of pressure. They don't want to raise something that might affect their career.
All right. The last three questions, that presentation I mentioned earlier about the Western Australia mining fatalities, it spoke about using your 10 pathways as a proactive tool in investigations, in audits, but it said they don't often always test all of the pathways. So my question to you is, how do we avoid the checklist or the process becoming just another paper exercise, the paper tiger?
Stick and flick. To the credit of the West Australian Inspectorate, they've announced that they will be using 10 pathways in their fatality prevention program, so that's great. There's been a real learning. I'm enormously grateful to the WA Mines Inspectorate. They brought me across there to do their roadshow. They funded they cooperated with Tanya Yankee's study, and they really have absorbed it. New South Wales, to its credit, used 10 pathways as part of its training package, but not for health and safety reps, unfortunately. So there is a bit of learning going on in that case. Any system is going to be is not going to necessarily get away from tick and flick. But at least that does raise the questions you should be thinking about. And of course you could audit them. You could say, okay, you've done a 10 pathways thing on this incident. Explain to me the maintenance, why there were no maintenance issues.
Yep.
So you can do a challenge audit. But these things are quite simple. And really asking the questions can often throw things out, because it's as with JSAs and take fives and slams and all those sorts of things, they can become very much tick and flicks. So it's a genuine issue. But I think at least with the 10 pathways, you're asking the right questions.
Okay.
And yep, you can audit them. And look, when people ask those questions, they tend to come back with quite interesting responses. Particularly if the system company says, well, we really want to know why we failed here. And then we know it's not going to be just retrain the operator because of procedural failures.
Right.
If they don't, different outcome. And the inspectorate could go in and look at the investigations, or the safety reps could say, okay, we've had an incident investigation. Did you ask these questions? Were there no problems in this area? Because the design and engineering one, when Heather did her study, she found that was there in virtually, I think she did 51 incidents. There was only one incident where there wasn't a design, engineering and maintenance failure, which I think is going to come on to a question you're going to ask me about critical controls.
That's a nice segue. So the next question is the study from Heather, and I'll show it on the screen. Something I found really interesting was the absence of higher order controls. So there was a lot of lower order behavior and positioning and things. So you mentioned risk assessment. So I'm wondering, how do we use your 10 pathways and apply it to the risk assessment? So my question specifically is, should we reject risk assessments for high hazard tasks that rely on lower order controls? And if so, what are some maybe decision points to help guide us on that?
Heather's study is interesting in the sense that she tested my model, 51 mine and coal and metalliferous mine incidents. In 75%, they had 5 to 7 failures of the 10, and 25% had 8 to 10. So the failures were there. And what she found particularly distressing was that, as I said, engineering, maintenance and design failures were significant failure point. And critical controls should be their default position. You should be looking at higher order controls, not administrative. And the administrative ones are cheap, but they don't work. They let you appear to do something when you're not doing something. Oh, we did something, but you really didn't. So, yes, you could do an audit and say, so you've had critical failures in engineering and design. Why have you gone to administrative practices if the failures are in engineering design? So we need auditing, and then sort of inspectors or safety reps could look at these investigations and say, well, there's been a failure here in the critical control. Why are we going to another type of control that's not going to work? So
who should make that call, do you think?
Well, as I said, inspectors looking at documented incident investigations, the company itself, its safety team should look at that. The union safety reps should look at that. And at a time, we need, whenever, these are sorts of issues that should also be addressed in government inquiries into health and safety, to point to the failure points. There is an over-reliance on, it seems to be an over-reliance on lower order risk assessment, JSAs and take fives, slams, these sorts of things, rather than having adequate safe work procedures, safe operating procedures. So that's something we found in mining, not everywhere, but it certainly seems to be a trend, because it places more of the responsibility with the individual worker. Now, whether that's occurring because management is trying to limit its responsibility under any potential industrial manslaughter prosecution, or just because it makes it easier and makes any prosecution look more difficult because, well, the worker didn't follow a procedure either. So I'm not entirely sure. Those have been mentioned in research we've done. But clearly, there needs to be systematic and targeted auditing of investigations and what comes out of them. So the inspectorate should do that. But also, I think we need to highlight these in the broader regulatory framework. I mean, there are some good developments. The new New South Wales legislation on digital work systems enables an authorised officer, i.e. union official, to go in and request the algorithm that companies are using. And algorithms are everywhere. It's not just gig work. They're everywhere. So that's a good start. There has to be a guidance note issued to management for that before it can start. But we need to start being more preemptive in that respect. Otherwise, we're going to always be chasing our tail and a decade behind where we should be. So people should look at the New South Wales digital work legislation. And Sweden, I'm involved in a big project on algorithmic managed work, which is being managed by the Karolinska Institute, Medical University in Stockholm, $3.4 million. And it's looking at the OHS effects of algorithms AI. And there's lots coming out of that, which will be very valuable. And we're also trying to do a bit on the mining industry here in that regard, because there's a lot of AI in I mean, Australia has probably the most, particularly in WA, the most automated mining industry in the world. So, and it's not just psychosocial risks. Algorithms there can be flaws in algorithms which can lead to physical risks. Or they can be too many screens for people to read, and that not only has a strain, but it can actually be dangerous. So that project is good, and hopefully that they're doing stuff in the regulatory area. They're now preparing a checklist for the inspectorates to use. So there are some good things, but yeah, generally we need to move more on that front and be more proactive and rigorously assess risk assessments. Too many poor practices go unquestioned. You know, it makes the job of inspector harder, or the unions that are involved, or the management teams that are involved. But it makes them a lot more effective, and even one fatality costs millions. It's worth not counting the human trauma, and it will disrupt your organ. There's no more questions?
Well, all I was going to ask is, do you have any, do you want to give one or two takeaways for a practitioner to apply your framework?
Read the book. look at the 10 pathways. We're doing a report for the mining industry, for the unions on this, and there will be the HPI 10-point reporting form, and that will probably be in the report that and it'll be published so they can get it there.
All right. Where will they find that?
It's 2 reports, one on New South Wales, which is completed and will go to the government very soon, and then it'll be published.
Okay.
The Mining and Energy Union will publish it. We'll do articles out of it, but the Mining and Energy Commission does. And then there's a second report on the other jurisdictions, which will come out at the end of May sometime, I suspect.
All right. Really appreciate your time, Michael. That was excellent.
No,
I really like your style. I like how you explain the concepts.
I can probably send the HPI form, which you might be able to put up as well.
Oh, that'll be excellent. Yes, because I was going to show you 10 pathways at the start, and at the end I can show your...
I'd have to adapt it because it's built for mines, but it would take very minimal changes to adapt it for all workplaces. It's the top of the form says where the mine you were at and what was the nature of the incident. But I mean, effectively, you just change the name, remove mine out, and say what was the workplace and what was the nature of the incident, and then it asks you to go through the 10 plus a one on contractors specifically, the 10 pathways, and you can add comments and things like that. But we got a lot of good responses. We've got about over 80 of them back from the mining industry, which was good. Good to chat, Ben.
Really appreciate the time. Thanks for that, Michael.
No, not a problem.
See you later.
Bye.